This is Anita Knutson reporting live from Minot, Dakota. There is a ginormous tornado coming towards us from the southeast.
Whether she was hamming it up for the camera or out dancing with her girls, Anita Knutson was the kind of person almost everyone liked having around.
Anita was the coolest girl. Like, everybody at school loved her. I was really lucky to have her as my sister.
At only 18 years old, she was living on her own, working 2 jobs and putting herself through college at Minot State University. Her life, it seemed, was just beginning, and yet
I touched her head.
Someone hated her enough to want her dead.
And she was cold.
When she was just a baby, Anita was taken in by Gordon and Sharon Knutson, and her adoptive siblings, Daniel and Anna, soon followed.
What did you really admire about her?
She didn't really care a lot about what other people thought of her. She was the nicest person I've ever known.
Not that she was always sugar and spice.
If somebody was being picked on, she would stand behind him. When she was in high school, there was a girl, the principal sent her home because she didn't follow the dress code.
But after studying the school's rule book, Anita wasn't so sure.
She went to the principal and says, I think you need to apologize to this girl. She says, I make the rules around here. And she says, I know you do. You got them written down. Every day when she'd come to school, she'd stick her head in the door and said, have you apologized yet? And finally he did. That was the kind of person she was.
But sometimes being that kind of person, a champion for the underdog, could be problematic. To some people, like her senior prom date, Tyler, that kind of attention could be hard to let go.
What about Tyler? What do you think of him?
He's different. He's still different.
She did mention one time after the prom that he was kind of persistent. She didn't say this, but he'd probably been trying to get her to go out, and she wasn't going out with anybody.
So it appeared he was more interested in her than...
And she wasn't him.
After high school, Tyler even moved into the same apartment complex to be closer to Anita. But then most people wanted to be close to Anita, until someone got too close. June 4th, a Monday. No one has heard from the normally sociable college student in days.
I talked to her Friday. She said she was going home. And that was the last time I talked to her.
The next day, Anita stays home from her job at a local hotel, and then no one's quite sure.
I called her Saturday, just out of habit of calling her every day almost. And she didn't answer, so I called Sunday, no answer Sunday. And so Monday I called her and still no answer. She should have been answering her phone.
After that, Sharon asked her husband to drive out to Anita's apartment to check on her.
When did you know something was wrong?
I went and knocked on the door, and it didn't answer, and her car was there.
Gordon tries to let himself in, but the door is locked.
So I went to the apartment manager and said that I wanted her to open the door. First she said she couldn't do that because she could get in trouble. And I said, well, I think maybe you'll get in trouble if you don't.
That's when the manager's boyfriend, the maintenance man, shows Gordon a sliced window screen he found in the yard. The screen to Anita's bedroom window.
They go over to where the window was, and I seen somebody laying in there. And I walked over, and the window was open, and I touched her head. And I said, you get that door open right now.
Inside the apartment, no signs anything sinister went down until they get to Anita's bedroom.
The mattress was soaked with blood. She was covered up with a large house coat. She was laying face down on the bed. I touched her and her body was cold, so I know she was dead. From that point, I think I was just in total shock.
It's in that state of shock that Gordon has to give the rest of his family the news.
He just called me and he said, Anita's dead. That was real hard. Because for the adoption, I had to go to court and tell the judge I would take care of her and make sure she was safe her whole life. And I didn't manage to do that. Didn't protect her that one day.
Across town, Sharon and Gordon's son Daniel has also just received the news.
We're driving home and my brother was crying. I was like, Daniel, what's wrong? Like, you know, I mean, I've never really seen my brother cry or even be like the slightest bit sad. And he's like, Anita's dead. At that moment, I didn't understand. I mean, I obviously understand what those words mean, but I mean, to hear it, I was just kind of like, she's dead? Like, she's so young. Like, she's the nicest person. Like, what happened? And he told me that somebody killed her, and
Police arrive a short time later and begin scouring the crime scene.
According to the forensics, the crime lab said that she was killed on Sunday morning. It was with a pocket knife, 3/4-inch blade, I would suspect, multiple stab wounds to the chest.
In what seems like a stroke of luck, investigators actually find the murder weapon, a cheap novelty pocket knife at the foot of Anita's bed. But the motive for her murder is much more elusive.
Were there any signs of sexual assault?
The police say no.
Sign of robbery? Were any of her belongings missing?
Well, that's a real interesting part of it, I thought, is that nothing was discovered missing. It was not considered a robbery at all, just plain murder.
But was it a random crime, or was this a targeted killing? To get answers, police start looking at the people closest to Anita, and few seem to stick closer than that old prom date, Tyler. In fact, to find him, detectives don't have to look any farther than just outside the taped-off crime scene.
He was there not too long after the day that I found her.
Was his behavior odd?
Yeah, I would say it was odd. There was no tears.
Right after the murder?
Right. I thought that Tyler was acting suspicious, and I thought it could be him.
But was he just a good friend with a lingering interest? Or something more? That's just one of the many questions I decided to ask him myself.
Nice to meet you, Tyler.
Nice to meet you.
This is a little awkward for me to ask because your wife is literally right here. Were you in love with Anita?
18 years old. It's the age most young people are just coming into their own. But for college student Anita Knutson, 18 would be her last year alive. According to police, sometime in the early morning hours of June 4th, someone apparently entered through her bedroom window, then used a cheap pocket knife to stab her in the chest where she lay. But there were no obvious signs of a motive, and she had no apparent enemies.
I don't know that I ever met anybody that did not like her.
She was that type of person. If you were an underdog, she was befriending you. She was always there for whoever needed a friend.
The type who didn't mind giving the shy guy a chance, like her date to the senior prom, Tyler Schmaltz. It was just a one-time thing, but according to some, Tyler stayed a little too close after that, even moving into Anita's apartment complex after high school.
What do you make of Tyler?
If I were to pick out folks that I thought were her best friends, I don't know that I would necessarily say that Tyler was one of them.
And after her death, Tyler only got closer, creating a Facebook page in her honor, and this 20-minute long tribute video for her on YouTube.
Don't get me wrong, I appreciate all that he's done, but I think it's a little odd that he's so involved.
Would you call Tyler's behavior a little obsessive?
A bit obsessive, yeah.
You would think he'd go back more in the shadows somewhere since he got married and that, but he's always out there.
But is that really obsession, or are those just the actions of a grieving friend? For that matter, what was the true nature of Anita and Tyler's relationship?
Nice to meet you, Tyler.
Nice to meet you.
The only way to really know for sure would be to ask him myself.
How close were you to Anita?
She was my best friend back in high school in the beginning years of college. We went to high school together, went to our senior prom together.
Were you dating?
No, not dating. I just had a crush on her. We were just friends.
Oh, so you had a crush on her?
Yes.
Was it reciprocal?
Yes.
She had a crush on you
No,
back?
no, it wasn't. No, sorry.
So it wasn't reciprocated? I mean, this is a little awkward for me to ask because your wife is literally
fine.
right here and waving at me. Were you in love with Anita?
No.
Just a good friend
Yes.
who you had a crush on?
Yep.
But what about Anita's dad's claim that Tyler was acting odd at the scene of the crime?
After Anita's murder, did the police interview, I know they were interviewing a whole bunch of people, did they interview you?
Twice, yes.
What was that like?
It was just a standard interview. They interviewed me the very second I got up there. When they first interviewed me, it was actually at the crime scene in the van. They were concerned because I knew exactly when I last talked to her, and they kept asking me about that, but that's because when I got up there, the first person I saw was her aunt, and her aunt asked me when the last time I talked to her, so I went on my computer and checked my chat logs, and they just kept hounding me on that, but then they just asked general questions.
Did you feel like you were a suspect then?
Not at the time, no.
But a month later, police brought him in again.
They were interviewing everybody in the apartment complex, including me and my brother that lived with me. They took DNA samples from all of us.
The results of those tests were never made public, but authorities say they never made a match to any DNA found at the scene, and Tyler claims he was cleared as a suspect. So then, why does he still stay so close to the case?
Some may say it's been 8 years since Anita was murdered. Why haven't you been able to let go?
Because she was just so amazing. It just meant that much to me. Back in my first days of college, all my high school friends moved away, and she was my only friend I had then. I'm a quiet, shy guy, and I'm not that much outgoing, so at that time, she was my only friend. She was just the most amazing person in the world, and she didn't deserve any of this.
And that's something everyone we've spoken to agrees on. So then, who was the one person that didn't? Shortly after news of the murder breaks, a witness tells police he saw a man running away from the area around the time Anita was supposedly murdered. Investigators release this sketch of the suspect and almost immediately get a hit.
That person came forward right away as soon as he saw that the photograph was published, or the drawing was published, and resembled him. He came forward and was cleared immediately.
Turns out he was just a jogger out on his normal route at his normal time.
Were there any other notable suspects at the time?
There was some maintenance men working on a building nearby doing roofing, the temporary workers in the area doing roofing that left. It was thought that perhaps one of those people could have been involved in that.
But police questioned those men as well, and no one was charged.
Anyone in her life that she knew?
Not that stood out to me, no. Not that raised any flags or nothing. The only thing that comes to mind is the janitor who had access, because he was the maintenance man on the apartment complex, and he was dating the supervisor of that complex.
Anita's dad said he was the man who found the screen to Anita's bedroom window, and in a tragic twist some might consider suspicious, the man reportedly killed himself roughly a year after Anita's murder. But police have said they questioned him thoroughly and don't believe he had anything to do with it.
And their answer was, well, we know him pretty well.
But investigators did have another person in their sights. Someone physically closer to Anita than almost anyone else. And she just happened to be one of the few people Anita had anything bad to say about.
She had a girl roommate, and they didn't get along. That person was not a safe person. She would have male friends over, and then Anita would tell me she would leave, and leave the male friends there, whoever they might be.
Had Anita expressed concern over her roommate to you?
Oh yes, many times. According to Anita, on her cell phone, this person would text to her, threatening letters.
So you don't know the nature of the text or the correspondence between her roommate and Anita?
That Anita was scared of her.
She was scared for her life, scared?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The biggest smile, the nicest person ever, my best friend. Just some of the words loved ones have used to describe 18-year-old college student Anita Knutson. Words that defined her life, now used to memorialize her in death.
Is there a memory that stands out more than others?
Yeah. My parents don't know this, but one Christmas we opened all of our gifts and we wrapped them all back up and went back to bed, and I guess that's probably my fondest memory of her.
So how could such a well-loved girl end up stabbed to death in her own bed? Shortly after the murder, there were a few theories.
She had a roommate. They were having a lot of arguments and words.
Reports were Anita and her roommate fought over almost everything. Police say at least one of those fights actually turned physical when the roommate slammed Anita's foot in a door. Anita's mom even says that after receiving numerous threatening texts from the roommate, her daughter said she was afraid for her life.
And she was planning on moving out.
Did the police ever interview her roommate?
Oh yes, the day of the funeral, this roommate's mother came to me and was very upset because the police had requested that this roommate had go down to the police station that day.
But what police found was that the roommate had a solid alibi. She'd been staying with her parents on the other side of town the entire weekend. Police still took DNA swabs from the girl, but had nothing to hold her further. Anita's father also says that at the time of her death, Anita and the roommate had patched things up, though he does wonder about another possible connection. The person Anita was thinking of moving in with when things were at their worst in the apartment.
And I said, so you're not going to move in with so-and-so? And she said, no. She says, I wouldn't move in there anyway because of her husband. If he was hitting on her, she didn't go for that. She would have probably said she was going to tell her friend.
The family passes that info and multiple other leads on to investigators, and tips roll in regularly from the public. But even with the actual murder weapon in custody, the case goes cold. Anita's family tries to move on with life, but Anita's adopted brother Daniel can't cope with the loss.
After Anita's murder, did you notice changes in Daniel?
Yeah, he wasn't as sociable with me as he had been.
He got into the drugs, and he was like running all the time. You could just feel it, that he was angry and running, and he was lost without her because they were super close. I talked to him the day before he committed suicide, and he was fine. And he said he'd talk to me later, and then the next day, he was gone. He shot himself.
Do you think that Anita's death led to Daniel's suicide? Did Anita's killer take 2 of your children from you?
Yeah. Definitely.
What are you feeling right now?
It's just hard to take.
This is the side of crime many people never see, the other victims.
Being told twice that your siblings are gone, I mean, that's crazy. It's kind of weird because my parents have their own biological kids that are a lot older than me, but like Anita and Daniel, I mean, they were my brother and sister. Like,
what is your opinion of the Minot Police Department's work to solve Anita's murder?
I mean, it's been 8 years. I don't think they're doing a great job, no.
Crime Watch Daily tried to set up an interview with Minot Police, but they initially declined our request, citing scheduling conflicts. A local reporter close to the investigation was able to offer the inside scoop.
The family is, as you can imagine, distraught over this. I mean, they think the police dropped the ball. You've covered this case. What do you think?
I don't know if they've dropped the ball. And I don't know if they've interviewed everyone they should interview, but I think police have their work to do, and you never know for sure what they've done behind the scenes.
The murder weapon, the pocket knife, was dirt and DNA on it. I mean, we live in the 21st century now. Did the police make any attempt for DNA matches that you're aware of?
I'm not aware that they did. I was told several years ago that they did not.
I mean, that's huge. Tyler was in that chair and said that he had a DNA swab and he was cleared. But from my conversation with you now, it seems like he and the other people who had DNA swabs weren't cleared, perhaps because there was never any test or analysis run.
I know the police took DNA from a number of people, but I don't know if they attempted to match that with anyone.
It's an outrageous claim, though it is important to note this is all information that comes from an unknown source.
Listen, I know you're a reporter, you protect sources, I get that, so I'm not asking you to violate this on camera. Is this someone that was reliable?
I could tell you this, the source was working the case at one time. What has happened since that person left, he doesn't know.
With an allegation so shocking, we had to know just where the investigation stood today. And after again reaching out to Minot PD, we finally got them to sit down in front of our cameras. She had the beauty, drive, and intelligence to go far.
Anita was a young, beautiful woman just coming into her own at Minot State University and spreading her wings, so to speak, and her life was snuffed out.
It's been nearly 9 years since someone stabbed 18-year-old Anita Knutson to death in her own bed, and her family wants answers.
My confidence in the Minot Police is not very high.
But not everyone agrees. In fact, one of the first people police questioned has become one of investigators' biggest supporters.
About 4 months ago, me and her kind of did a petition to send to the Minot Police Department to bring in extra resources to help law enforcement come find answers and more information. And that lasted about 45 minutes. And they talked about all aspects of the case and all the suspects and how they're still keeping it a priority.
And to prove the case is still a priority, after several attempts to set up an interview, Minot Police finally agreed to sit down and tell us their side of the story.
I know the Minot Police Department has taken criticism from family members, friends of Anita's, the community. People don't like to see crimes like this go unsolved. We understand that. We're sorry for that, and we really wish that we could come up with the answers for the family.
But police insist they've done and continue to do everything they can, denying allegations they didn't test key pieces of evidence.
We recovered DNA evidence from the crime scene in general, including the knife. Nearly everyone that we interviewed submitted to a DNA sample, and all those samples have been compared to the DNA collected from the crime scene.
In addition to what they say has been thorough evidence collection, police tell us they questioned as many people as they could find.
We talked with workers from the apartment complex. Prior to the homicide, a construction company had been doing some work on the building. I don't know if we got all those guys or not. I hope that we did, but it wouldn't surprise me that there might have been a few that we did not interview.
Anita liked to go to a dance club downtown. We went through their list of customers, patrons, with a fine-tooth comb. We were not able to locate anything that led us in any promising direction.
But police assert the case is still very much open and are even providing Crime Watch Daily with new details.
The window leading into Anita's bedroom had a screen on it that was cut, and I believe that that was something that was done after the fact. There was some blood found on the cut of the screen, which certainly leads me to believe that it was done after the fact. I believe the purpose would be to mislead law enforcement, to try and show that this is possibly an entry point.
But why? And how did they get in if not through the window?
The main door was locked, so I believe that whoever committed the murder either locked the door on their way out, or if it was locked when they arrived, they would have had to have some way to get in, such as a key.
And the list of people who had keys to the apartment is a short one.
She, at the time, lived with a roommate that she did not get along with. We did try and pursue that, and obviously we're at this point where an arrest has not been made.
So then, is the roommate still a suspect? Our producers have made an attempt to locate and speak to the girl, but have so far received no response. As for what authorities think,
I don't know that we really ever discounted any of the suspects that we came up with. Everybody, until we get new direction in this case, is still somebody that could possibly be involved.
and police tell us new scientific advances may be getting them closer to finding that somebody than ever before.
We have been in contact with the state crime lab, and since 2007 there's been advances in technology, so they are taking another look at the DNA in that case. I think now enough time has passed that if we run try to run DNA on that knife again, that there could potentially be something found.
For now, in addition to the police effort, Anita's one-time prom date, Tyler, continues to work his own citizen investigation, which has yielded some very interesting results.
I just received a new tip today that I haven't gave to them yet.
Which was what?
Some random person contacted me on Facebook saying that this one person told her that this sex offender who's been in and out of prison, someone at a party told her that he's the one who killed Anita.
We have not yet been able to verify whether or not police have followed up on that tip, but they assure us they continue to chase down every lead they receive.
Anita Knutson's picture hung on my individual cubicle for many years. And no, I mean, we will not give up. She's not forgotten.
This is Anita Knutson reporting live from...
Gone, but never forgotten. Survived by a grieving family trying to make sense of something so senseless.
And if you had that opportunity to look into the face of Anita's killer, what would you say to him?
You ain't fit to be alive.
I go to the cemetery. I go out, visit with her and Daniel a lot. But it's you have these little people in your life, and it's really hard. And they're not there anymore. And that's about it.
Why? I mean, why?